The Wasp Factory, Chapter 4, Part 5, The Bomb Circle. Paul had great fun running and jumping from rock to rock, and throwing stones into pools between the rocks. Rock pools were something of a novelty for him. We went farther up the wasted beach, still finding interesting pieces of flotsam, and finally coming to the rusted remnant I thought was a water tank or half-buried canoe from a distance. It stuck out of a patch of sand, jutting at a steep angle, about a meter and a half of it exposed. Paul was trying to catch fish in a pool as I looked at the thing. I touched the side of the tapered cylinder wonderingly, feeling something very calm and strong about it, though I didn't know why. Then I stepped back and looked again. Its shape became clearer, and I could then guess roughly how much of it must still be buried under the sand. It was a bomb. Stood on its tail. I went back to it carefully, stroking it gently, making shushing noises with my mouth. It was rust red and black, with its rotund decay, smelling dank and casting a shell shadow. I followed the line of the shadow along the sand over the rocks and found myself looking at little Paul, splashing happily about in a pool, slapping the water with a great flat bit of wood almost as big as he was. I smiled, called him over. See this? See this, I said. It was a rhetorical question. Paul nodded, big eyes staring. This, I told him, is a bell, like the ones in the church in the town. The noise we hear on Sunday. You know, just after breakfast. Oh, you know? Yes, just after breakfast, Frank. What? The noise just after Sunday breakfast. Frank. The noise just after Sunday breakfast, Frank. Paul hit me lightly on the knee with a podgy hand. I nodded. Yes, that's right, bells that make noise. They're great big hollow bits of metal filled up with noises, and they let the noises out on Sunday morning after breakfast. That's what this is. A breakfast? Paul looked up at me with mightily furrowed little brows. I shook my head patiently. No, a bell. B is for bell, Paul said quietly, nodding to himself and staring at the rusting device, probably remembering an old nursery book. He was a bright child. My father intended to send him off to school properly when the time came, and had already started him learning the alphabet. That's right. Well, this old bell must have fallen off a ship, or perhaps it got washed out in a flood. You know what we'll do? I'll go up to the dunes and you hit the bell with your bit of wood, and we'll see if I can hear it. We will do that. Or will we do that? Would you like that? It'll be very loud and you might get frightened. I stooped down and put my face level with his. He shook his head violently and stuck his nose against mine. No, I won't get frightened, he shouted. He was about to skip past me and hit the bomb with a piece of wood. He had already raised it above his head and made a lunge when I reached out and caught him around the waist. Not yet, I said. Wait until I'm farther away. It's an old bell and might only have one good noise left in it. You don't want to waste it, do you? Paul wriggled, and the look on his face seemed to indicate that he would actually mind wasting anything just so long as he got to hit the bell with this plank of wood. All right, he said, and stopped struggling. I put him down, but I can't hit it. But can I hit it really, really hard? as hard as you possibly can. When I wave from the top of the dune over there, all right? Can I practice? Practice by hitting the sand. You can't hit. Can I hit the puddles? Yes, practice hitting the pools of water. That's a good idea. Can I hit this puddle? He pointed with the wood at the circular sand pool around the bomb. I shook my head. No, that might make the bell angry. He frowned. Do bells get angry? Yes, they do. I'm going now. You hit the bell really hard and I'll listen really hard, right? Yes, Frank. You won't hit the bell until I wave, will you? He shook his head. Promise. Good. Won't be long. I turned and started to head for the dunes at a slow run. My back felt funny. I looked around as I went checking. There was nobody about. There were only a few gulls, though, wheeling in a sky shot with a ragged cloud. Wheeling in the sky shot with ragged clouds. Over my shoulder, when I looked back, I saw Paul. He was still by the bomb, whacking the sand with his plank, using both hands to hold it, bringing it down with all his strength, jumping up in the air at the same time while yelling. I ran faster over the rocks, onto the firm sand, over the drift line, and up on to the golden sand, slower and dry, then up on the grass nearest the dune. I scrambled to the top and looked out over the sand and rocks to where Paul stood, a tiny figure against the reflected brightness of the pools and wet sands. Overshadowed by the tilted cone of metal beside him, I stood up, waited till he noticed me, took one last look around, then waved my hands high over my head and threw myself flat.